Watch legs 2, 3, and 4. If the band goes down, we'll yell for more.
I interviewed Bill Haley in 1956, and I said, Bill, what's it like? You're king of the world, walk around the clock, shake, rattle, and roll. He said, we're finished. I said, what? He said, we're finished. There's a young, good-looking kid out of the South they call the Hillbilly Cat. And he's good-looking and young and all the things I'm not, and he's going to take over. Bill Haley knew what was coming.
Shuffle to the left, shuffle to the right, gonna rock and roll till the early ready to rock and roll.
Elvis was such a phenomenon because he was a one-off. No one had ever seen anything like this. This was like a Martian, really, especially to the American religious Southern belt.
There was black music and there was white music, and radio stations, there was very much a segregation in music as well as there was in every other aspect of life in the United States. And I think for a lot of people, they would hear this voice and this, and then they look over and say, well, that's a white boy singing that way, you know? So I think it was kind of a shock for the system.
There was no classification for Presley. Country people didn't think he sounded country. Pop people certainly didn't think he sounded pop.
His voice was so unusual for that time period. And his clothes were unusual. His dress with the peg pants, you know, and all that stuff, and stripes down his pants leg. And he's a good-looking kid, a good-looking guy.
Now, the first time we met him, he had on a pink shirt with a black pair of trousers with a white stripe down the side. This made him look different. Of course, the way he combed his hair with long sideburns, you know, that made him look different. So the first thing I remember was his looks.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight.
A lot of the other musical performances that were around, even Bill Haley, who was a contemporary, Bill looked a lot older and a lot straighter, more straight-laced. And Elvis was hip, and he was young, and he was handsome. So there was a big difference, and he sang like a black man and could dance and all those things. And Bill didn't, you know, Bill looked like an insurance salesman with a guitar.
In those days, the artist, anybody that would sing, to come out and do a number, they'd just stand there. But Elvis was just not one that could come out and do a number and stand there. If he did a number that moved, he'd move with it. And this is the reason that he made such an impact.
When he got up on the stage, that charisma that he apparently had when you saw him live, or even when you see the clips, it comes across. He just brought a certain amount of energy, wild energy, raw energy, call it what you will, to the performance and to the songs.
When he first started, he didn't dance around too much. But a couple of times he was moving around a little bit, and we got through, and he said, why are those kids screaming and hollering? And he said, well, you're dancing, you're moving around. He said, oh, am I? I don't think he realized it. So after that, he did more of it. He could see the reaction of the kids by then. You know, he said, oh, that's pretty good. I'll just do some more.
Rock and roll music, if you like it, and if you feel it, you can't help but move to it. That's what happens to me. I can't help it. I mean, I have to move around. I can't stand still. I've tried it, and I can't do it.
When he was singing and playing, he'd always raise up on the balls of his feet, both feet. And with the big breeches legs back then, and when he'd do that, they'd start flopping, and it looked like he was he was really getting going with it.
Got a gal named Sue, she knows just what to do. I got a gal named Sue, she knows just what to do. She knows how to love me, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what you do to me.
I don't think Elvis invented rock and roll. It had been around before him, and you know, he's referred to as the king of rock and roll. A lot of people argue that, Little Richard being one who claims he's the king of rock and roll. Perhaps he is. But what Elvis did that others didn't is he brought it to the masses.
She almost drives me crazy. She knows how to love me, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what you do to me.
As far as his musicianship is concerned, Elvis lacked a little. He wasn't really a musician from the standpoint of technical knowledge. But from what he could do, he was the apex of musicianship. Because whatever he did, if it didn't sound good, it still was truth. So he gave himself to whatever he wanted to do.
Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. For my darling, I love you, and I always will.
He did possess a superb voice. Limited, yeah, musically limited. I mean, he wouldn't necessarily be able to sing an out-and-out pop song, or he couldn't sing maybe jazz. But certainly in terms of rock and in terms of country and country blues and R&B, he was right up there, you know, even in the early days.
I thought he was good. He was a good musician. He knew in his mind what he wanted to hear. And sometimes he'd have a hard time explaining it to you because he wasn't the best musician. None of us were good musicians, but we knew kind of what his thinking was, you know, so we basically went along with him, and somehow or other it worked. It really worked well.
Well, you may go to college, you may go to school, you may have a pink Cadillac, but don't you be nobody's fool. Now, baby, come back, baby, come. Come back, baby, come. Come back, and baby, I wanna play house with you. Well, listen, let me tell you, baby, what I'm talking about. Come on back to meet the little girl so we can play some house. Now, baby, come back, baby, come. Come back, baby, come. Come back, and baby, I wanna play house with you. Hit it!
Elvis had a fantastic band, and you had Scotty Moore on guitar. DJ kept just the steadiest backbeat you ever wanted. Bill Black, he was the bass player for Elvis. He wasn't necessarily the best bass player in the world, but he was the one that was best for Elvis.
Scotty was a kind of a blues jazz player he wanted to be, and Bill was just an all-around bass player. That's, you know, just not country, not pop, just the feel of it. That's what he had a good feeling to his bass playing.
The first Elvis sounds unique were because of Scotty Moore's unique guitar.
Basically, Scotty Moore and others at the time would be taking these kind of sort of riffs and phrases and speeding them up. So instead of being kind of like instead of being a blues thing, they'd be going. And Chuck Berry had used it to great effect, kind of riffing guitar, quite incessant, quite driving. But I think it was Scotty Moore that really sort of opened up the sort of ballpark and sort of got it going on. And again, very simple playing, quite kind of quite modest playing by you know, today's standards, but just had the sort of raw energy that was that sort of, you know, gave maximum sort of excitement value, and really suited Elvis Presley's sort of voice and his whole style of vocal delivery.
I try to listen to a song and play something I think that would fit the music, or the way the guy's singing, you know, that way.
The way he played was so unique from all the other guys. It was different. Played the thumb and the rhythm, and just, you could hear his record, you could tell it's Scotty. There's no question about it. And all the guitar players hadn't figured out what he's doing yet, you know?
I think the guitar breaks in the early arrangements of Elvis music really set the style. It had a lot of a neat, heavy tremolo, lots of echo in the guitar. It really sort of said that this was a very different sound. It wasn't country music, it wasn't rhythm and blues music. You know, it was a mixture of the two of them.
First record, I had a ES-295, Gibson ES-295. I kept it through the first 4 records. On the fifth record, I got a Echosonic amplifier, which had an echo in it.
When Scotty played the guitar, his searing guitar riffs and that, it gave Elvis the chance to get away from the microphone and do a bunch of gyrating around, you know, and shaking his hips and wiggling around. Half the time he didn't play the guitar even, you know, it was more of a prop than anything. But he played off of Scotty.
That's all I know, mama, anyway do.
We put out that first record, well then of course the local DJs around Memphis started getting calls and everything, and a couple of other people that were quote unquote music managers and what have you, and everybody was calling him, and the three of us were all just sitting chatting one day, and he was talking about the people calling him, and he said, well, I don't know what to tell them. He said, and it was actually Sam's idea. He said, I'll tell you what, said Scotty, said, why don't you sign up as manager, said, for a year, and give us time to look for somebody that we all trust and want to work with. And that's the way what happened.
Scotty Moore, come over here and say howdy to all your friends in Texarkana, will you?
Howdy. Well, we want to invite everybody out to the show Friday night, and we're going to have 2 shows at 7 and 9. And they've all been asking about the drummer that we had up there last time, DJ Fontana. And he's going to be with us. He's a regular member of our band now, and he'll be there with us Friday night.
Basically, the country acts and the country programs wasn't really familiar with drums at all. So they wasn't sure how the people would take it. So they said, well, you stand back there and play. And I said, well, that's all right with me. You get paid the same money, you know. And after a couple of weeks, they said, well, just bring a snare drum out and bring a cymbal out. And by the time we got through with Elvis, they had the whole set out. You know, he said, just bring them all out. And that's what he wanted, and that's what Elvis wanted. So I guess maybe they kind of figured they better go along with his wishes, I guess, because he was drawing a lot of people in there by then.
Presley played at these fairs. He actually sung at these country fairs, you know, and basically that was country music, you know, it was like a cross between bluegrass and traditional country, and he amalgamated country, skiffle, blues, everything into one.
None of us had ever been on the road, so you had number one, you'd have an experience, and then pretty soon you started getting tired and said, well, this will never end. But and yet tomorrow, the next show will be better. It'll be a better show, be more money, it'll be, you know, everything's supposed to go up.
Well, we had one car, me, Scotty, and Bill, and Elvis, had all the instruments in that one car. Sometime he'd bring Gene Smith with him, which was his cousin. Sometime Billy, another cousin. And other times Red West. So it was a car full of people and instruments, but somehow or another we all got in there. And hey, we had a great time.
You've covered a lot of territory in the last few months, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. I've covered a lot, mostly in West Texas. That's where my records are hottest.
They tell me that they almost mob you there, the teenagers. They like you so much. But you know, I happen to know that you have toured all down in the eastern part of the country, too, down through Florida and around, and that the people went for you there about as well as out in West Texas. Isn't that right?
Well, I wasn't very well known down here, and my records don't have a distribution that they should have.
Sam Phillips, if he gets credit, and he deserves credit, he always wanted to find white singers that could do rhythm and blues, and that's where Elvis fit that category. The trouble was with small independent labels like Sun is distribution nationally. He had a problem with that, and it became very expensive.
Well, there had been several people, I guess, been trying to buy his contract, and Parker came into the deal and set the whole thing up with RCA, and when they paid Sam the money, and that's when we went to RCA and cut the first record.
Colonel Parker saw that RCA had international distribution, that his boy would become a giant. And Sam couldn't provide that, and Sam knew it.
Here's a young man who in a few short months has gained tremendous popularity in the music business. His records are really going like wildfire. He's America's new singing sensation, our new RCA recording artist. Here he is, and a big reception for Elvis Presley!
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell. Well, it's down at the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel. I'll be so lonely, I could die.
Heartbreak Hotel was Elvis's first recording that was released for RCA Victor. It therefore being on a national level as opposed to Sun where it was just regional. So it got national exposure.
Heartbreak Hotel was a breakthrough for him because it was the first million seller.
The hot tears keep flowing from the desk clerks dressed in black. Well, they've been so long on Lonely Street.
Well, it's just another studio date. We did it at Trafco. Trafco had their building was down on McGavock Street, and the lower floor was RCA had rented the studio, and that's where we cut Heartbreak Hotel.
There wasn't a so-called echo chambers like they have even in this studio, and they run some mic cords and mics down the hallway for echo on the record. That's how the sound of that. They wanted to get the old Sun sound on the new Heartbreak Hotel.
Just like the first few years of Elvis's career was heavily rockabilly, then it became more rock and roll, and I think Heartbreak Hotel was the start of that.
I was in the studio when he recorded. Of course, Jordan Harris weren't not on it, but I was sitting there and listening to him. And if you'd heard the demo of the person that had made a little demo for him to learn it from, you thought, man, this ain't no hit. But when this guy got through with it, it was just a great recording.
Well, if your baby leaves you, you got a tale to tell. But just take a walk down Lonely Street to Heartbreak Hotel.
It's a wonderful track. It's Elvis's husky, breathless vocal delivery is the key to it all. It's just really sort of, it kind of just draws you in, and there's a great little bass break at the end of each verse that announces the chorus.
The people at RCA at the time apparently thought it wasn't a good song, and they were reluctant actually to put it out. They didn't think it was that strong, but history has proven them to be wrong.
It's still a great record today. This is the astonishing thing about a lot of Elvis's early recordings. If you listen to them today, they still sound fantastic.
Things I found about Elvis when I did his show here at Empire Stadium was, and I said this to everybody on the air the next day, I can't believe it. He sounds on stage just like he sounds on his records. And the reason for that is, as opposed to today where everything's layered in the recording studio, in Elvis's time, Elvis or Roy Orbison or whoever, they went in, all of them into the studio together and recorded together. It was kinetic.
Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A happy turn of the season to you all. On account of we have a wonderful and a long show tonight, here's Brother James to tell you what's going to happen.
Well, we're going to get things started out with a young man who is making his 6th appearance on stage shows. He's that dynamic singer of songs who incidentally leaves for Hollywood tonight for a screen test. We wish him a lot of luck. Here he is, Elvis Presley.
It didn't really bust right open until we went up and do the Dorsey shows. And then people saw him, and he kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
The early television performances had a lot to do with him, with the world noticing him, even though a lot of people have told us that my mother and father wouldn't let us turn the television on when he was on because they thought he was vulgar. But you see, this created a lot of curiosity. this made the public curious about, hey, I got he's going to be on next Saturday night. I've got to turn this guy on and see what all these people are talking about.
Elvis could have made it without television, but it just would have taken longer. He was the first one to prove that television was a powerful medium, and it was relatively new in those days too on a national basis.
Well, get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. Get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. Oh, I don't know my breakfast 'cause I'm a hungry man.
When Elvis first sang Shake, Rattle, and Roll on television, the impact that it made was huge because I don't think up to that period in time nobody moved like Elvis did. It was quite exciting to see somebody young on television singing rock and roll.
I said, shake, rattle, and roll. I said, shake, rattle, and roll. I said, shake, rattle, and roll. The way you want to do it right, just savor your doggone soul.
It must really have been, if you were there, like a hurricane coming through the studio, and a fantastic performance.
I'm like a Mississippi bullfrog sitting on a hollow stump. I'm like a Mississippi bullfrog sitting on a hollow stump. I got so many women, I don't know which way to jump.
Here's this long-haired, greasy punk, you know, with sideburns, screaming out at them on the television screens. And he was shaking, rattling, rolling all over the place. And, you know, the adults, of course, they thought, this isn't music, he can't sing.
I think they could accept the R&B artists doing all that sort of stuff, but to see a white, wholesome American doing all this mad hip swinging was a bit of a shock.
All the singers in those days stood there, but Elvis watched the gospel singers and the black performers move. So he moved on stage.
When he was first brought to the public, you know, they wouldn't even shoot him from the hips down, all that kind of thing on various TV shows. They called him vulgar. And like he said, that really hurt him. He was very, very concerned about what the reporters would write about him and what the people would say about him. We used to say, Elvis, forget it, what difference does it make?
I've tried to figure it out. I don't see how they could think that it would contribute to juvenile delinquency. Someone that's only singing and dancing. I don't see that, because if there's anything I've tried to do, I've tried to live a straight, clean life and not set any kind of a bad example. I will say that there are people that are going to like you and people that don't like you, regardless of what business you're in or what you do. You cannot please everyone.
People were afraid of him. They were afraid of Presley because he was just out there. He was like you'd opened a beehive and you had honey on you already and they were coming at you, you know.
The song is called Blue Suede Shoes. But it's one for the money, two for the show, three to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoes. You can do anything like all
Elvis could do anything different from anybody. I mean, he could take a song that anybody had and do it different. I mean, if he just put his heart and soul into a song, it was just a different song.
Songs like Blue Suede Shoes, Tutti Frutti, and some of the other songs that Elvis did cover. Carl Perkins was the one who wrote Blue Suede Shoes and did the original version of that song. Carl Perkins' version is very good, no doubt about it, it's original. But Elvis brought something else to it. He brought an excitement and an enthusiasm. Like he seemed to really get into the song.
It's kind of pretty sort of rough and ready, but it's just kind of got this sort of edgy excitement. Whereas Carl Perkins' was more kind of more of a sort of kind of lilting sort of country-ish sort of thing, whereas sort of Scotty Moore's guitar part and Elvis's acoustic strum was, well, you can knock me down. It was much more kind of aggressive and sort of, and I think this is one of the sort of key elements in Elvis's early sound where it really kind of it was sort of almost pin you against the wall and say, you're going to pay attention to me.
I listened to both of them, Carl Perkins and Elvis's. And Carl had a superb version of it. He really did. I think his was a little bit slower than ours, but Elvis did a great job on it. And Tutti Frutti did a good job. I think he heard that from Little Richard. One of those guys had it out before we put it out. So he was always listening to different artists, and if he found a song he liked, he'd try it.
Boom, I got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. I got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. She knows how to love me, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what you do to me. Tutti frutti, oh Rudy. Tutti frutti, oh Rudy.
Presley's interpretation of any song really is always something special. I think he gave them more fire, he gave them more life, and he gave them, they speeded them up a lot more than when he did. You know, they all got sped up. They all had a bit more of a kick.
Little Richard's version was sort of based on the piano, and it was kind of classic boogie-woogie rolling piano style. Very pleasing, in fact, but Elvis took it and just went really kind of sort of turned it into a belter. So the guitar part was going something like this. So altogether, a lot more exciting proposition, driving forward a lot more and kind of much more energetic.
It's more of kind of a rockabilly feel, especially more so than what Little Richard did.
Nowadays, when you hear just anything that has that kind of guitar rhythm, or all of them, they all sound very boring and like you've heard this a million times before. In fact, at this point, this time, the only time you would have heard those kind of guitar phrases before was Bill Haley and the Comets and a couple of other bands, and then Scotty Moore with Elvis. Actually, this was like the sort of blueprint for that kind of guitar playing.
I mean, as far as the band, we were just, we enjoyed playing and just playing. There wasn't a producer, there wasn't anybody to say you got to play something this way or that way. They let us do what we wanted to do.
Nobody pushed us, because he wouldn't allow that in the first place. You know, he said, you know, if everybody's uncomfortable and everybody's uptight, we're not going to cut good records. If he felt the room was uptight, well, knock it off, guys, and we'll get a bite to eat and take off for an hour or so and come back.
I don't think there's anybody who can decide what I can do best better than me. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be a bad mistake if I had someone else telling me what to record and how to record it, because I work strictly on instinct and impulse. I don't read music. My taste might be a little different because I choose songs with the public in mind.
RCA was good for him. The studio was good for him. The musicians were great. That's where you hear guys like Boots Randolph on sessions, Hank Sugarfoot Garland, the guitar player, Scotty and Bill, who had been with Elvis from the beginning, the Jordanaires. The whole thing came together because they had the production people, which Sam Phillips did not have.
Well, I'm tired and so weary, but I must go along. Here the Lord comes and calls me away, oh yes.
The Jordanaires just started a little bit before Elvis, so they were relatively new on the music scene at the time that Elvis kind of broke out nationally. But he always liked gospel music, and what he heard in the Jordanaires was this gospel kind of a feel that he wanted to interject into his music.
There will be peace in the valley for me someday. There will be peace in the valley for me. Oh Lord, I pray. There'll be no sadness, no sorrow, my Lord, no trouble I see.
Elvis used to listen to us sing on the Grand Ole Opry. we would sing country songs, and we didn't. But a lot of times we do a hand clapping spiritual. Now that's what Elvis really dug. He was brought up singing that type of stuff with his mother and dad, and we had a very, very smooth sound. And this was a smooth sound that he wanted. And of course, we always helped him with his arrangements. All those arrangements, those bop-bops, all those doo-wops in the background. That's all our arrangements.
The main thing that they would do was they'd able to take the chord sequence, generally in those days a blues chord sequence, which was based around a flat seventh group of chords, and they would take the notes from the scale and create a guitar chord or a piano chord. And they were really, really good at it. They had great ears, they were able to hear each other, what they were singing, and pitch beautifully to each other. So it was rather like having another keyboard instrument in the background all the time. Very clever stuff, and it was barbershop. That's I think one of the terms for it. But they took it to another level. It was introduced into rock and roll by then.
You know I can be found sitting home all alone. If you can't come around, at least please telephone. Don't be cruel to a heart that's true. Baby, if I made you mad for something I might have said, please don't forget my past. The future looks bright ahead. Don't be cruel.
They helped us out a lot because they were doing all the background parts, you know, singing all the doo-wops, and you know, to me it sounded like horn sections sometimes, you know, and it made it sound like we had a big band back there, you know. And Gordon played a little piano on some of them and on some of the stage things. And Hoyt Hawkins, he's passed away now. Hoyt played a little piano, so it helped fill up the band.
Why should we be apart? I really love you, baby.
I remember watching them on television, and I love the Jordanaires, but at the time I remember thinking, who are these guys in the background? They didn't seem to fit the picture.
It was odd, but it was clever in a way. It would make him look like the rebel. You'd have the straight backing musicians, and then you'd have this rebel lunatic at the front going mad, gyrating his hips, all the girls screaming, and the black hair, you know, the quiff falling down and everything, and he would look like nothing on earth.
Rock and roll, not a funk hop step, not a dungaree dodge. I headed to the gym, to the sock hop ball. The jumping, the cats are going wild. Let me really send my day to
There was a kind of this reassuring maturity having the Jordanaires back there, and like when you sort of see them, for instance, on a song, on the televised version of Ready Teddy, they're clapping along, having a great time, and again, they're really enjoying it. I think they realised that they joined a very special band, they were backing a very special artist, and Elvis was giving them their heads. They were allowed to maybe do more than they were allowed with other artists.
Elvis never really made too many suggestions as to what we would do. If he didn't like it, he'd say, can you do something else right here? But Elvis never added too much with what he always liked what we did.
Before Hound Dog came out, we had different songs that were by different artists that were very much what we call like middle of the road music now. Patti Page and Frank Sinatra and all this kind of stuff. And that was pop music. It was very kind of safe and, you know, songs about love and things like that. And then you had the American black music that was on black, you know, radio stations and this kind of stuff that not a lot of people, not a lot of white people in America heard unless they tuned in these radio stations. And songs like You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, which was actually written for a woman singer. When Elvis first heard that, he thought, you know, well, this would be a great song to do.
The song's about sex, it's about having sex. And even though Elvis's version is sort of sanitized and has been cleaned up, like been bowdlerized, in fact, from the original, which was recorded by Big Mama Thornton in 1953, Elvis's version in 56 it's been cleaned up, but it's amazing that he gets away with it, and it became such a big pop chart. Sort of no one actually listened to the lyrics and went, hey, actually that's about lovemaking and having sex.
Interestingly, the whole arrangement's different. Mama May did "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," where Elvis did "You Ain't Nothing But," up like that.
2 guitar parts on Hound Dog. The first part is a rollicking part that Bill Black is playing on bass as well. So it's going. There's another guitar part which Scotty is playing, which goes. So the two together create the sound. Then that's essentially it. There's a bit of piano, there's a bit of bass, drums, and Elvis.
It was certainly one of the wildest records anybody had ever heard. It had Bill Black, he kept a nice steady beat. The Jordanaires were given the oohs and ahs in the background and the hand claps. And Elvis played a bit of rhythm. You could hardly hear him on guitar, but he was there. And Scotty Moore, he threw in 2 of the wildest space age guitar solos that had ever been recorded up until that time.
So on Hound Dog, which is in the key of C, it would start like this.
I played piano on a lot of his recordings. I even played piano on Hound Dog. I bet you didn't know that.
Gord Stoker was playing piano because Shorty Long had he had another gig he had to go to. He was working on a stage show, and so he had to leave, and Gordon took over piano, and so we just had the 3 Jordanaires singing on that.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Yeah, you ain't never gonna rabbit, you ain't no friend of mine.
One of the key musical elements that creates such tension and sets up the chorus so wonderful is that at the end of each chorus there's a pressed drum roll, and it just hangs there, makes the whole song just hang there, and you kind of, first time you hear it, you think, what's going to happen now? What's he going to do? Is he going to go sort of jump into a sort of hip swinging dance? Is there going to be a guitar break? Something's going to happen. In fact, it would just be Elvis with the second verse, but it's just great tension.
Well, I had Gretsch drums, so and that's all I really knew, what they sounded like, and I used them on all the early records.
DJ Fontana, his drums are just like a machine gun, and Elvis's wild, searing vocals all the way through it. It's a definite classic. One of the biggest songs ever recorded, sales-wise.
And what makes Hound Dog stand out with people is the other side of that record was called Don't Be Cruel. And the combination in 1 year was 11 million sales.
He was big enough that all across America, preachers were putting him down in the pulpit and calling it devil music.
People everywhere say Presley and rock and roll music will depart in due time. What is your feeling about this?
I'm inclined to agree with them. I mean, people change. I mean, sometimes they like you, and then again, later on they don't.
Well, honey, I love you, I know too much. I need your love, and I know too much. I want the thrill of your touch. Me, I can't hold you, I know too much. Now you got me dreaming, don't you leave me broken hearted, 'cause I love you too much.
Elvis worked really hard at his stage act, and I think he was a bit of a perfectionist. I know that in the recording studio he would go through different takes till he got the song just right.
A lot of times we'd do it in a few takes. A lot of times we would do as many as 30 takes, and then he'd go back and take number 2. You know, he'd say, play that number, go back. That's where he kind of started when he was thinking, go back up and play number 2. You know, and he'd take that take.
But once he got started, he said, okay guys, it's time to go to work, you know. He was ready. And we'd listen to the play, you know, listen to the acetate, and everybody take little notes of what you want to play, you know, in our own minds. He said, well, let's try it, and we'd kick it off, and if he didn't like it, he said, well, now let's do something else. So it's a matter of hit and miss, just whatever he thought, what he wanted to hear, that's what he got.
He might miss a word, I might miss the chord, or but we're talking about, ooh boy, the skin of your teeth back in those days, I guess.
Up to that time, I would say he was pretty much a straight ahead rock and roller. Nobody took him as a serious singer, but Love Me Tender, I think, showed the softer side of him.
There are singers that sing slow songs that make you want to throw up. And there's singers that sing of slow songs that really move you. And Presley knew how to interpret a slow song.
Love me tender, love me sweet. Never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. For my darling, I love you, and I always will.
Well, when you dare do a ballad, you've got to make sure your notes are better, because you got to hold them longer. Your words have got to be cleaner. They've got to be empathetic with the situation in the song.
That song really had a lot of words for him to put his heart into. And he loved a lot of people. He especially loved his mother, and of course his mother was living at the time that he recorded that. And I'm sure he had his mother in mind when he did Love Me Tender.
Essentially, it was just close mic on Elvis's voice, no reverb, acoustic guitar, and a little bit of backing vocals at the end. But what it did show was, of course, was actually the warmth of Elvis's voice and the depth of his voice.
Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. For my darling, I love you, and I always will.
That was a good record. I Love Me Tender. Some of the rest of them, they're fair, you know, but that was a darn good record, and it was for his first movie. I thought it was pretty darn decent.
It's interesting from a production point of view. It's a bit of a risk because suddenly from all the rock and roll stuff, you had this very slightly syrupy, but still, maybe it was to show off his voice. Maybe that was the reason he did it, but it works.
He approached the song different. He sang it different. He had an excellent memory, and he didn't have to read the words. He knew that he had the words right up here, and this way he could put his heart into a line. He could put his heart into the words of a song.
Around him, his influences were blues, black blues music. There was country music, which was essentially white music, but had its roots in black music as well. And then there was the church.
And he loved gospel music. Every chance he got to go hear a gospel group, he would go. Years back, they used to have several gospel troops come through town all the time. And they played Memphis, of course, and he'd go back and see them, every one of them.
In many Elvis songs there's a gospel influence, and that mainly comes from the backing vocals supplied in the early days by the Jordanaires. So in this song, the Jordanaires are fulfilling the part of a congregational choir. They're sort of ba-da, 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 really energizes the verses, and that's a sort of staple in the sort of world of congregations. And then they employ another gospel technique where Elvis sings a sort of a call and answer little sketch. Elvis sings these memories and they sing these memories back, and the vocals start to overlap. And you can clearly hear that that's where this song has come from. It's come from the church.
Very traditional of that time, 50s, coming up to 60s, sort of a vocal arrangement and musical arrangement with, I suppose, for the first time, a mid-tempoed Presley, slightly more mellow, for the first time, not doing the more aggressive, I suppose for the time aggressive, and more off-the-wall spontaneous vocaling. It was just like he had more of an arrangement in it. That was probably restricted by the backing vocals, because he couldn't go, he couldn't go all over the place, because the backing vocals were so arranged and so tight and so formatted. He had to go with it.
It showed that he was not afraid to attempt different things.
When the Blue Moon Turns to Gold would appeal more to an older audience, where all this other stuff, the early stuff and everything, It's All Right and all that stuff would appeal to a much younger audience, and would get much onto those more fringe type radio stations, where this could be mainstreamed and mainlined into the major radio stations. And I always got the feeling that that was a calculated move.
Many people would say to us, what do you think Elvis would do if he was still alive? Many people say that they think he would be doing strictly all gospel if he were still alive, because that's really his first love. That's really what he wanted to do more than anything. I don't think that would be. I think he'd be doing just what he wanted to do if he was still alive. I don't think he'd be all doing all gospel. I think he'd be doing, he loved country music. He never got to do much country music, but he loved country music, and there's a lot of great country songs that he would be doing if he were still alive even today.
When they invented the title of King, it was suited to Elvis, because there's nobody in entertainment that's even close to the caliber of what he was.
When people wanted music to change, suddenly he was there. And I think that's why he became a phenomenon.
They broke the mold when they made him. He was a special person in every way. In his performances, in his attitude, in everything he brought to this business. It wouldn't be what it is without him.
Well, listen to me, baby. Try to understand. I'd rather rather see you dead, little girl, than to wed another man. Oh, baby, come back.
Elvis was the beginning of what the Beatles became in a lot of ways. For instance, John Lennon's been quoted to say, before Elvis, there was nothing. Elvis had a huge influence on the Beatles. They listened to Elvis before they were recording. So that influence went on to the Beatles and then onwards.
Everybody copied him, everybody imitated him. And he did not invent rock and roll, but he made it.
Yes, there was the Bill Haleys and the Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Rich and people like that. But really, he has been the most enduring of them all.
No, he wasn't overrated by no means. He didn't like to be called a king, but still, he was the #1 guy, and he still is.
He was the best at what he did of anyone who has ever come along.
He deservedly sits astride the music world as the very king of rock.
Rock and roll, take on my shoes, roll up my faded jeans. Rock and roll, baby, pour on the steam. Jump to the left, jump to the right, gonna rock and roll till the early ready to rock and roll.